The LA wildfires continue to leave death, destruction, and unanswered questions in their wake. A federal judge deals a major blow to woke ESG investing. And Tulsi Gabbard has a change of heart on a controversial government surveillance measure. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, January 13th. For the past week, wildfires have ravaged Southern California, causing nearly 200,000 citizens to evacuate, and the latest death toll is at 24. A new report shed light on what may have caused the devastating Palisades fires, an earlier fire set off by New Year's Eve fireworks. Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas. So, Julio, you've been on the ground out there in California documenting these fires. So what have you seen?
Well, besides the smoke and the fire, which is, like the main thing, right? The thing that when I was in Mandeville Canyon over the weekend, the thing that really struck me the most was actually seeing firsthand how much dead leaves, branches, and underbrush was still covering the hillside that had yet to be burned, right? And that's kind of one of the reasons why these wildfires have been so devastating, is because of the state's mismanagement of forest management. And so being able to actually see that, and then seeing the fire slowly make its way down, going through all of that dead plant life, and just adding fuel to this already big fire, it's a stark reminder as to how, not to say that this was entirely avoidable, depending on how these fires actually got started, but a lot of it could have been mitigated if there was competent leadership to take forest management seriously. And that's just one component, right? And then there's the other water management and personnel management. And so this kind of really showed how leadership within the state and at the local level really has mismanaged and kind of put the important things aside for progressive policies.
Julio, how about the citizenry there? Have you been able to talk to some of the people who have lost so much? I mean, obviously it's devastating, but what's the attitude? What are the kind of things you're hearing?
Well, so when I was in Altadena, which is part of the Eaton fire, just north of Pasadena, I did run into this couple, and they weren't willing to speak on camera for obvious reasons. They were very distraught, but they did tell me how quickly everything had moved, because the man walked out of his house. It was at 7:30 a.m. This was last Wednesday, and he saw the flames coming from a canyon that he actually normally would go hike and bike in, and so he realized how close it was, and so they got out within the hour. And then by the time I had arrived in the afternoon, I mean, his entire block was just completely gone. And so their 1980s convertible, I forgot the exact model, but that had been left behind, and it was completely gone. And he just started breaking up and tearing up, because he just said, my wife really loved this car, and now it's gone. So there's obviously a lot of sadness, a lot of there's just shock of how quickly things got out of control. But then there's also a little bit of that anger, right? That I ran into actor Dennis Quaid, and I asked him if he is also frustrated with the incompetence. He said, "Oh, hell yeah." He said that there's too much of politicians pointing the fingers at each other, and right now we need people to just get the job done and getting this under control.
Yeah, let's go ahead and listen to some of that from Dennis Quaid.
Mr. Quaid, just really quick, do you share the same concerns and frustrations with how the local and state government were prepared for this?
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Bunch of politicians pointing fingers at each other. And that's what, I don't want to hear that stuff on the news. I want people out doing stuff about it. That's what.
I appreciate that from him, because it doesn't matter at this point if you're a celebrity, if you're a regular person, if your home is in danger or has already burned down, Julio, you're going to be righteously angry about this in this scenario.
Yeah, and more than that, I mean, even when I was there, the incompetence was really still on full display because we got 3 warnings countywide telling people to evacuate when it was supposed to only go to Woodland Hills. This is when the Kenneth fire had just started, which is north of downtown Los Angeles, and so there's just a lot of anger at the continued level of incompetence of people who are supposed to be in charge of these hectic scenarios, right? They're supposed to take charge and lead, and they're continually to fumble the ball in big and small ways. And so it will be interesting to see that once all of this is finally over, it'll be interesting to see if anyone will be held accountable. There's a lot of people who are not optimistic about that fact just because of how entrenched the political machine in Los Angeles is, and then to see what will actually change at the federal level, since we do have the Trump administration starting next week. And actually, I spoke to one man in Encino when the Palisades fire was getting aggressive again, and I did ask him, would you feel better with Trump being in office right now, or are you looking forward to Trump being in office in a couple of days? And he said yes, like that would make me feel 100% better, because our local politicians are terrible.
Well, the man at the top right now in California is Gavin Newsom, and he was asked by CNN about the lack of water, and here's what he had to say.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in Palisades, ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter in this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system.
So many people have made a big deal. When he goes out there, Newsom he literally throws his hands up in the air and he goes, oh, they'll figure it out, right? How much responsibility and control do you think that Gavin Newsom has over this right now?
Well, definitely with the forest management side of things, because it's not obviously just a Los Angeles issue. This is a statewide issue because California does have beautiful nature, right? That's one of its still very few appealing aspects of the state. And so you have that. You have the one thing that I think was really pertinent was, like, for example, here in Florida, right? Whenever there's a hurricane, the National Guard is put on standby. The National Guard started being mobilized so that they're ready for when the requests come for assistance, that they're able to go right into action. Gavin Newsom didn't call the National Guard until the next day after the fires had started, so they weren't pre-positioned. And the reason why that's so important, as someone who was in a reserve capacity in the military, it takes time. It takes time to get the personnel in place because it is a part-time thing. And so they have their regular lives that they're at. They may be busy being affected by the fire or getting their loved ones out of the way. And then if they get the order that they have to come back in to prepare for this, and then you have the mission, you have the mission briefings, you have all the things that get them ready to actually go out, and then it takes the time to actually go out and get in place. And so I didn't see the National Guard really out in force until the last day before I left. And so when hours and minutes count, you got to have every single resource and asset that you have available. You have to have that preposition prior to something like this happening, because at that point, you're not being proactive, you're being reactive. And so I think that's another thing that hasn't been highlighted with Gavin Newsom's, again, just lack of urgency because everyone knew, everyone in the state knew that these winds were going to be coming for, almost a week in advance. And so, it's just shocking to continually see California politics and California policy just not doing what needs to be done, whether it's small things or whether it's a natural disaster like this.
Julio, before we let you go, Karen Bass is definitely the next on that list. She's the Los Angeles mayor, and she had some advice for the locals. Take a look.
Right now, if you need help Emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. Los Angeles, together is how we will get through this.
I can't believe it. This is what we're going out doing. It's like Western North Carolina all over again when FEMA was out there again. Oh, you can just go ahead and they can figure out on their cell phones and just turn their TVs on in their houses. Well, their houses have burned down. They can't just put this up. It's not that easy for them. But how have California residents been left with absolutely no leadership at this point?
Well, I see, because I mean the voters put them there. That is something that needs to be reckoned with, and that's why it's important to see what will happen after everything is all said and done, because then the recovery process is going to take a long time, especially in a state like California, and especially in areas where this has been hardest hit, right? So it's unfortunate, right? Because I mean, I prior to moving to Florida, I did spend a lot of time in California. It was very, very tough to see these areas that I'm familiar with just be completely thrown into chaos, thrown into this fear, and it was inescapable. I mean, even before I left the airport, the smoke and the air quality was so bad. Even though I wasn't right at the front lines, I started getting a headache, and that headache didn't go away completely until I had to leave the area. And so even if people who aren't being told to evacuate or having to leave, they are still going to be negatively impacted by this for a long time. And so, the hope is that this was a painful, unfortunately, this was a painful learning experience. And so hopefully the electorate, the next time that there's elections at the state and local level, that they're going to prioritize people that are actually competent, and instead of checking off certain boxes.
Well, Julio Rosas, we really appreciate the update. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And Matthew, you've been talking with people. This is your old home. This is like the fire line is right up to where you used to live.
Yeah, I was tempted to give Julio my old address just to see if our house was still there. I think it is, but it's right on the line near the Altadena fire. Eaton Canyon is where we used to hike with my kids. So 8 or 9 families we know from the school there that we went to, they all lost everything. They lost their house. Many cases, it's really a brutal situation for them. So it really breaks the heart. And I think the thing about it is just how needless it is. Like he said, you could have mitigated this at least, if not prevented it. And it's everything's on fire, and Venezuelan gangs are trying to sift through the ashes of these people's homes to loot. And you have to wonder at what point will this end? Because I don't think this will be the first infrastructure disaster in California.
No, but we did see that big 18-wheeler outside in the Mercury One parking lot today. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go ahead and help them, you can go to mercury1.org. But when we come back, did politics contribute to the LA wildfires? Our next guest explains why he says yes. Coming up. It's a new year, and it's time to focus on what matters most. That's creating a healthier lifestyle, enjoying more time with your family, and spending less money on going out to eat. GoodRanchers.com is here to help you turn all of those resolutions into solutions. And when you buy your meat from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches in the United States, and you can skip all of that imported meat at the grocery store. Good Ranchers delivers high-quality, 100% American meat straight to your door, so you can start 2025 with better choices and better meals and really better moments at home. Visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim $25 off, plus free express shipping and your choice of free either ground beef, chicken, or salmon in your order for every order for an entire year. So you can spend more time with your family now and less money going out to eat. Enjoy more quality, nutritious American food, and visit GoodRanchers.com. Use my code Jill today for meat that delivers just that. It's GoodRanchers.com, code Jill to claim $25 off and free meat in your box for a year. GoodRanchers.com, American meat delivered. Well, we've been talking about all the destruction in Los Angeles, but what are the political ramifications behind Los Angeles burning to the ground? Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford broke it down for us in his latest Beltway brief, and he joins us now. So, Chris, a lot of people are talking about this, but how did California politics, how do they fuel the fires there in Los Angeles?
Oh, every single aspect of it was some kind of malfeasance or some kind of total neglect or some kind of potentially even corruption. It's hard to explain this. California has surrendered huge amounts of its political control to planet first and nature first environmentalists. So I'm not talking about you or me or hunters or Roosevelt style conservationists. I'm talking about people who don't think that humans should have an impact on the environment around them. Because of that, it's got a bunch of rules. Among them, you cannot clear dead, rotten, dry trees from your own property because those are habitats potentially for local animals, but they're also kindling for fire. The brush and the on the hillsides, and all the dry brush that should be cleared. Forest clearing is something that the American Indians understood. It's something the settlers understood. It's an early human technology that's been pushed aside and ignored. I mean, Gavin Newsom promised when he became governor of California he was going to completely change that, but he didn't do a single darn thing. So you have all these politicians going out there and saying, this is all about global warming, and this is this, and this is that. It's about Donald Trump. But the reality is that California has been looted. It's been looted for decades by Democrat politicians who put money towards their programs, their ideas, towards the homeless, towards foreigners who are here illegally. Ignore things like making the water work. The fact that there are now clips out of the woman who's in charge of Los Angeles's water supply talking about what attracted her to the job was fixing racial equity. Well, the water didn't work during the storm, these fires, because the firefighters couldn't get the pressure. A massive reservoir was empty for repairs during a fire season. All of this is coming home to roost, and the politicians who for years have just been able to blame climate change, well, they can't for a biblical level disaster like this.
Yeah, it really is unbelievable. Everything that comes out over the last few days just looks like a parody, but it's not. It's real and it's tragic. This won't be the last time we speak of it either. But I want to move on to this federal judge who has just issued an interesting ruling that some of us might hope could spell the beginning of the end for ESG investing. You realize that American Airlines is, purportedly conservative, I'll say, to many people in Texas. But the reality has not been that. And these pilots argued their 401k fund was being mismanaged to push liberal agendas instead of maximizing profits. And there's an indication that the courts might end up agreeing with them. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a federal judge in Texas sided with the American Airlines Pilots Union, whose pension has been put towards ESG companies by BlackRock. And BlackRock is one of those massive, giant, globe-spanning conglomerates. Literally uses, I think, controls over $11 trillion assets. And to say that BlackRock uses a lot of these assets, that not necessarily in the way that you and I would agree with, is an understatement. BlackRock, well constrained, of course, by profitability and a want to make a profit, which comes first, has been putting those airline pension funds and 401ks toward ESGs, even though that is something that, in general, underperforms normal stocks, non-liberal stocks, by about 10%. So the pilots union brought lawsuit, or some of the members of the pilots union. And first, a Texas judge decided a few weeks ago that this class action could include the 100,000 or so people who have been paying into this 401k since 2017. And this next ruling is that they could move forward, and that American Airlines, well, going along with the general corporate culture of the time, which has been woke and stupid for years and years and years now, actually did break their responsibility to have loyalty to these pilots, to make sure that they maximize their retirement, their profit, as opposed to playing politics. Now, investment is not one of the craziest areas of liberal takeover corporations. Hiring is a much more dangerous area. During some of the most woke years we've gone through in these last couple moral crusades, white males represented about 6% of corporate hires. So that's a serious problem. It's actual real discrimination. But this is something that is important, and it helps fund a left-wing economy that is often working at odds with American energy, the American worker, et cetera. And this is an important blow to beginning to dismantle that.
Well, Bedford, American Airlines is in our backyard, and Capitol Hill is in your backyard. And it is a very big week over there on the Hill because Trump's cabinet picks are all going to go before the Senate for all of their hearings. And we have Senate Majority Whip, Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, on what to expect next.
Republicans are now in the House, the Senate, and the White House because Americans wanted safety and prosperity. So you're right. The rubber hits the road this week with all of these hearings on the cabinet. And then when President Trump takes office next Monday, there is going to be shock and awe with executive orders, a blizzard of executive orders on the economy as well as on the border.
Shock and awe coming back again. Is Trump really going to be able to push all of his nominees and executive orders through?
The nominees, I think most of them will get through, but will they be ready and standing at attention in their offices in time for the inauguration? That's a different thing. I think, people like Marco Rubio, former member of the U.S. Senate, and someone who's generally in good standing with Democrats and Republicans on foreign policy, he's going to get through no problem. Some of the other Senate confirmations, like RFK, is going to have a more difficult job. This week alone, you've got Doug Collins, who's going for VA. You've got Pete Hegseth, whose FBI report is now being looked over by the committee itself. His confirmation's coming up. Doug Burgum for the Interior Department, who's actually, despite being a little squishy on some things, has been a great friend to American energy and private land use. Kristi Noem is potentially for Department of Homeland Security. I think that she'll do well. Pam Bondi for Attorney General is someone that the Democrats in particular, are going to attack because she personally represented Donald Trump during one of his impeachment trials. And they're going to say, how could you possibly represent the president as Attorney General if he represented the president against illicit prosecutions, or not illicit, but politicized prosecutions from the Democrats? You've got Russ Vought coming up on Wednesday. Now, he's someone who was very active in Project 2025. Was one of Donald Trump's most efficient players in the first administration, someone who really understood the bureaucracy. He's coming back to once again head OMB. Democrats now have 4 years of his track record that they're going to try and tear apart because, well, they don't like really effective people. The list goes on for different nominees, but for our friends who have to guide these people around the halls and walk them through and introduce them to senators, it's going to be a couple of sleepless nights.
Do you think that there is any, does it vary by nominee right now, or is there momentum on Trump's side, or have the Democrats sort of regrouped and are they ready to fight? I mean, how do you read the overall landscape?
There's still momentum on Trump's side. I think the landscape started to look shaky early on in the nomination process because a lot of these picks are of the canceled. They're two middle fingers in the air to the establishment. It's the kind of things that could potentially cause trouble, of course, with Democrats, but also with squishy Republicans who will happily confirm Joe Biden's nominees, but are much more suspicious of Donald Trump's. They got their sacrificial lamb, though, in Matt Gaetz, someone whose personal accusations about his personal and moral life were just too much for the stodgy Senate to really swallow and say, we're going to confirm this guy. And then when they tried to go after other people like Pete Hegseth, the power of MAGA social media, conservative allies of Donald Trump, came down so hard on those few senators who spoke out that the rest fell in line. And I suspect that while some of these guys are going to have difficult hearings, they're generally going to get through.
The dominoes are starting to fall in line. Bedford, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. I'll see you tomorrow.
And Matthew, I want your take real quick before we have to go, just on the overall process, right? This is going to be a very big week in Washington, D.C. to set the stage for the inauguration next week.
Yeah, I mean, everything depends. The next 4 years, in some ways, starts with this process, and it will be contentious. I love what Chris said about Trump having the momentum on his side. That does seem to be true sitting in the middle of the country. But you never know. And what will happen is there'll be dirty tricks. There'll be all kinds of things going to come out last minute potentially, and we'll see what happens. I doubt it'll be completely smooth, but it's the first round for America to see the conflict between Trump and the establishment.
Let's go. We've been waiting for this, right? We want the victories when we can take them, and this is going to be a very exciting week. It's going to be exciting because when we come back, we'll explain how RFK Jr. and HHS can make American families healthy again. Coming up. Donald Trump and RFK Jr. have promised to make America healthy again. And with Robert Kennedy We've seen he's going to head HHS. So how are the pair going to deliver for American families? Here to break it down for us is Terry Schilling. He's the president of the American Principles Project, and he wrote about this for theblaze.com. So Terry, right, you argue this, that they're going to fight for American families. RFK Jr. is going to be leading that fight. So how exactly is he going to do that?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jill. What RFK Jr. represents and is the same thing that Donald Trump represents, which is a disruption in Washington, D.C. And it's no mystery to any of us that our children are under attack for a very simple reason. They need to recruit their political activists for the future, the leftists. They're not getting married. They're not having kids of their own. And so what they want to do is they want to confuse our kids on gender. They want to hop them up with all these different types of drugs to make them sick. The Make America Healthy Again agenda is absolutely a necessary component for the Make America Great Again. We can't be great if we're not healthy. And HHS, Health and Human Services, needs to get cleaned up. And RFK Jr. is the perfect guy to do it. He's made, listen, there's been the real thrust of this is there's been concerns about RFK and how conservative he is. After all, he is a Democrat that crossed party lines and joined President Trump in his ticket. He's pro-life. He's made serious commitments to the pro-life movement. He's made serious commitments to the pro-family movement by getting puberty blockers investigated and researched and all the data from the NIH released about those. He's a fantastic pro-life, pro-family, center-right nominee and absolutely necessary to President Trump's Make America Great Again agenda.
Terry, we were just talking to Chris Bedford about the confirmation process and fight that's about to unfold. This one is interesting to me because, regardless of everything you just said or anyone who is a fan, he is a polarizing figure when it comes to public health in this country. And we've seen the power of the powers that be, right, these days, censoring everyone in America for decisions they make when it comes to their health. So how do you see the confirmation process going for him?
Well, I would issue a very strong warning to especially Republicans, but also Democrats that look to stand in the way of RFK Jr.'s nomination. Doc, as you know, I work very closely and well with a lot of the donor class in this country. They've helped build APP into a very serious organization. They're not messing around. Right. And people want to get this country turned around. They want to get HHS cleaned up. And RFK is part of that. And so any senator that's looking at holding up this agenda and holding up President Trump, they better think twice because donors are ready to fund strong primary challengers. But you and I both know, Doc, what the real opposition here is, and that is to power. Right? We have these corrupt people in power that are making tons of money by making this country sick, by making our children sick and our parents sick. And we've got to clean this up. RFK Jr. is like the penultimate Democrat in this country. And it's not a coincidence that it's largely the Democrats that are trying to stand in the way of his nomination. It's because he's one of the last remaining honest Democrats, right? He's not one of these guys like Schumer that's been totally bought out and corrupted. All the guy has been criticized for lately has been asking to do research and the full gamut when it comes to vaccines, right? He's not saying don't get vaccinated. He's saying we need to look into this and see if it's actually causing the problems that people claim it is. But he's a robust disruptor. It's exactly what this town needs at the right time.
Well, Terry, you say that, and I just think back to the problems and the issues that people have and the trust that they have right now in the public health institutions, right? How do we go about rebuilding that? You almost need a guy like RFK Jr. that is a complete outsider to rebuild that trust because right now, at this point in time, it is so diminished from where it once was.
No, that's exactly right. And COVID exacerbated that, right? The response from our federal officials and state and local officials on the COVID front greatly hurt any credibility or faith that the American people had in these already lacking institutions. It's very, very good. Listen, our strongest attribute here is transparency. It's the best disinfectant here. And that's what RFK Jr. is going to do, is he's going to bring transparency at a minimum to Health and Human Services to clean it all up. If we get this information out there and we disseminate it on these new platforms that allow for free speech, that allow for open debate, which apparently Facebook is one of those now. So we now have X and Facebook to get the truth out now. So we've got a huge opportunity to really show the American people just how corrupt things have gotten and how much change is actually needed in this country.
Terry, I want to press a little bit on the pro-life point, because I think it was a very interesting article for this reason. There's a lot of people in our audience who are part of the pro-life movement and have been for their entire lives. And they may like RFK, and they see that he's not your normal Democrat. He supports restricting abortion after a certain period of time. But it doesn't seem like he's your quintessential pro-lifer, right? And he maybe doesn't agree with everything that they've been fighting for. And so their concern has been, okay, well, if he's in charge of HHS, are there policies related to Planned Parenthood and other things? And what you're saying is, no, this guy's going to be good. Is that right?
No. That's right. And Doc, he's not just going to be good because I say it. He's going to be good because of what he said. He told Josh Hawley in a meeting about a month ago that he would reinstate President Trump's pro-life policies that he had at HHS in his first administration. Right? And I think that's very important. And don't forget, Doc, RFK Jr., while he might have run as a pro-choice Democrat in the Democratic primary, he also has said things on public record that every abortion is a tragedy. This is not someone that was passionate about abortion or encouraging people to shout their abortion. This is someone that's always been uncomfortable with abortion, but probably felt as a necessity to be the Democratic nominee that he had to hold that position. And what rectifies that is the only thing that can rectify that, which is public pledges to do the right thing, to do the pro-life thing. And also, Doc, don't forget, RFK Jr. serves at the pleasure of the president. He is there to support President Trump's agenda and not his own. And so I think, and he's also pledged, by the way, not only to defund organizations that promote and perform abortions, he's also pledged to only name pro-life deputies underneath him. So he's made some really robust promises and pledges to the pro-life community and to America. And so I'm totally satisfied, and I look forward to working with him.
Terry, as we're a week away now from the inauguration. I was going through some of my videos this morning, and I posted one on X today of the Pennsylvania when that was announced in the room at Trump headquarters that night. And there you were just celebrating in the room. We're almost there, my friend. We are almost there. Just one more week to go. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Matt, when you listen to him, and I like that he went out and just, you had that point and counterpoint about RFK Jr. and the pro-life stuff. And remember that he does serve at Trump's pleasure, right? It's going to be something that Trump wants. It's not really going to be what RFK Jr. thinks is best in every scenario.
Yeah, and I think what Terry is saying is they've made their peace and figured out where their views overlap. And there are enough public promises, and there's enough people in place in the Trump administration where no one should be worrying about, oh, he's not pro-life enough. And that's the case that Terry's making very convincingly. And the people at the White House Policy Office, et cetera, I mean, there's still a lot of pro-lifers there. So I know people were concerned when the platform changed and all this. But at the end of the day, this looks like a pro-life administration. And also, RFK, of course, is adding all these extra things that were never there before when it comes to basically making life better, being pro-life in a variety of ways when it comes to public health. Well,
now we have to wonder, are we going to have to look at Tulsi Gabbard? Because she has done a shocking about-face on government surveillance. J. Michael Waller will unpack her possible motivations up next. Tulsi Gabbard is Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, but she's recently changed her opinion on a major surveillance authority. Gabbard told Punchbowl News that she would support Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and she confirmed this opinion to CNN. But this is the surveillance authority that was used to spy on the 2016 Trump campaign, and the FBI has exploited it to spy on American citizens. So here to break this down for us is J. Michael Waller. He's a senior analyst at the Center for Security Policy. So I look at this. Is Tulsi right now, is she just trying to appease senators to get nominated, or is Washington changing her before she's even sworn in?
I think being into the intelligence community has changed her perspective. So when she was in Congress, her approach was to completely do away with what they call Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. This is the section of the law that allows our intelligence services to spy on foreigners abroad, and they can incidentally collect on American citizens. And that's kind of unavoidable if American citizens are interacting with foreigners. That's what the law was for, to track these, to spy on foreigners. I've got no problem with that. She wanted to repeal that because of all the abuses, which really might have been a bit too far. You got to reform it and hold the wrongdoers accountable, which has not been done. So I think it's normal, and I don't see anything fishy about her moderating her view on that issue.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about how this works now and how you think it should work?
Well, it should work the way that it was designed to work, which was to allow the intelligence community to do its job, to spy on targeted foreigners abroad, meaning they're non-U.S. persons, they're not American citizens, and it's not being done domestically for the purpose of tracking down terrorists, but there are a whole lot of other bad actors out there like spies and saboteurs and so forth. I think most Americans could agree that that's a good thing to do against foreigners abroad who mean harm to us. What happened, though, is around 2021, 20 thereabouts, the FBI and other agencies used that as a backdoor mechanism to spy on Americans domestically, illegally, by going either to the FISA courts with a warrant, in the one case which is legal, get a warrant from a judge which is legal, or to use the Section 702 as a loophole to spy on foreigners who might know Americans who the FBI and others want to spy on politically. So it was a complete perversion of the law, and no one was held accountable for that.
Well, while we have you, I want to get your take because we heard on 60 Minutes, FBI Director Chris Wray weighed in on Donald Trump's decision to pardon the J6 prisoners. Let's listen.
Christopher Wray oversaw the largest case in FBI history, the attack on the Capitol in 2021. President-elect Trump has vowed to pardon many of the 1,500 people who were charged.
I do think it's important to step back and remember that we're talking about hundreds of people who are convicted, most of them pled guilty, of serious federal crimes.
We've heard the stories so many times, right? But Christopher Wray, he's not going to let this go. He's still going to go out there and say, oh, they're all convicted. This is terrible. This is an injustice. Yeah. We should not let this happen. What's your take when you hear that off 60 Minutes?
I mean, look at him. He's just glorifying himself, because in that same interview, he said communist China is the biggest national security threat. But the biggest counterintelligence threat.
They heard you. They heard you.
They're spying on me now. And now they're saying that January 6th was the biggest FBI case in history. So you can see the FBI's priorities are all upside down.
Yeah, I mean, Wray is just this unconscionable figure to my mind. When you look at what's going to happen realistically at the FBI, I mean, do you have a solid hope now that there's actually going to be reform there? I mean, I've heard numerous people get into weeds with different things that ought to be done. There's a lot of radical proposals on the table, but I wonder if we're going to get justice there and if there's going to be a serious enough reform.
I really don't know. It depends. I don't think the FBI can be reformed. I know the FBI very well. Wrote a book about it, Big Intel, that you've had me on before, but it can't be reformed. It's like trying to reform something that really has really good parts in it, but the whole thing can't be fixed. So let's take the good parts out that really matter. The counterintelligence part to find foreign spies, the ones to break up child sex trafficking rings, or things like that. Keep that stuff because it's important. But you don't need the FBI to be running it. You can put it someplace else, because the FBI has its own culture, its own ethos. It's almost like a cult itself, where you're part of this 3-letter fraternity. And so it makes you somehow special and superior to everybody else. But look, at the FBI's best and brightest emerged in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, saying that the terrorist attack in New Orleans was not a terrorist attack.
Yeah, I mean, so give folks, again, we've talked about this before, but what you would do if you were in charge.
So I would, if I was in Kash Patel's shoes, I would dismantle the Bureau gradually and in an orderly way. First, it's a bloated bureaucracy like any bureaucracy is. Second, it performs missions that it doesn't need to fix. Why do you need it investigating firearms crimes when there's already ATF? Why do you need it investigating financial crimes when you already have an IRS and a Postal Inspector Service and an SEC and all sorts of others? So FBI is performing all these duplicate functions. Take the good agents from there who really do their jobs and transfer them out to agencies that, or even create a new entity by breaking apart other agencies to get the best and the brightest of those. So take those apart, and then take out functions where the FBI really isn't doing a very good job, but it does have good people for it, like counterintelligence. We don't have a standing counterintelligence service, and in a democracy, you cannot have a federal law enforcement agency that is also a domestic intelligence service. It just doesn't work. And that's what the FBI has become. So we have to break apart those functions completely. And that means taking counterintelligence out of the FBI and creating a new counterintelligence service. By that time, you don't really have anything left as a Federal Bureau of Investigation. So we should just do what was done with the heroes in the OSS during World War II. They've done their job. It's time to move on to something else.
Well, Michael, we are a week away from the inauguration. So finish this sentence for me. Donald Trump will have a successful presidency if
he picks all the right people who act as a team.
There it is. And that's what he was saying earlier this week. He said, I need everybody in there on my team, and I need them to be ready to go by January 20th. J. Michael Waller, thanks so much for joining us.
See you next time.
Well, Matthew, I look at that and there's some good parts and there's some bad parts. We can take away some of the FBI, but not all of it. And I'm one of those people that just wants the entire thing to be gone.
Well, I mean, I think breaking it apart, like he says, makes the most sense and is also one of the more radical solutions. And, he knows what he's talking about there. The question is, how possible is that? How can you get that done? And I do believe that there are people potentially, who walk in there who will take this on, but it's something we're all going to be watching closely here for our audience, because this is a key part of what became corrupt over the last 8 years.
Got to get the people in there. Got to get the members on the team. Don't go anywhere. We're going to wrap up the show right after this. Well, it doesn't matter how many times you see the videos coming out of Los Angeles, the wildfires, Matthew, that everybody is dealing with in that area. It is still completely shocking to see how widespread this still is days later. And we still don't know where the end is in sight.
Yeah, and first I want to shout out to our North Carolina people, because we will be on the North Carolina story, which isn't over, and those people are being hosed by the federal government in the middle of winter. So we acknowledge that, and we'll be doing more of that in the show. I think what we're seeing in Los Angeles is really important for people to pay attention to. It's not just, the crazy Californians, because it's a sign of something that has been happening throughout this country, which is incompetence and wokeness leading to actual real life people will die consequences. And when you look at the actual neighborhoods we're talking about here, I know it's easy to sit back and think, there's a bunch of rich people and movie stars that kind of deserve what they voted for. And, some of that is true. They do deserve what they vote for. I mean, they voted for these people, so they're getting the consequences of the vote. But it's important to realize what these neighborhoods represented. And the Pacific Palisades and the Altadena area both represent the best of the American dream and the best suburbs in America. I mean, Altadena is pre-World War II America. Zane Grey, the famous Western author's estate, I used to walk by there. This is an area with old craftsmen's homes built from the 1900s to 1920. We can't even make that quality of home today. All gone. Smoldering ash, with the National Guard guarding it from being looted by foreign gangs. Pacific Palisades represents the best of post-World War II America, the golden age of California, the rise of Southern California from, a place where there's a lot of, anyone can go and afford a home, into this fancy thing it became. But this was a beautiful, rooted community. It wasn't McMansions, it wasn't, gaudy stuff. And all those communities, those suburbs, are gone, as well as the Malibu coastline, which is iconic, right, representing success in the American dream. So I would say spiritually and politically, these eras, this spirit has already died, and now the physical manifestation of that is literally gone, and it won't be coming back. There's still a lot of hope for where we're going, for rebirth and renaissance, but I think it's a sign of something that's passed away, and that should be very sad to all of us.
Well, the rebirth, how about the rebuild? We can see Western North Carolina, they're ahead of California, unfortunately, in this area. But we see the struggles that they have in North Carolina right now just to try and maintain any portion of a home that they might still have, try and live on that land with an RV or whatnot. But they are having such difficult times trying to look ahead and see how they're even going to start rebuilding. Then you put that in California with all of the rules and regulations that they have. I mean, this is a 15 to 20-year project, it looks like.
Yeah, in the Altadena area, it's an unincorporated part of LA County. LA County will rule that. I can see them putting up a bunch of mixed use, multifamily. The old beautiful single family housing is probably never coming back, certainly not at the quality level it was. In the Palisades, those people, even though Newsom is going to try to fast track it, I don't even know how that's possible. I think everyone there is in for a rude awakening with how corrupt and complicated the local government system is. And then on the coast, when it comes to Malibu, the California Coastal Commission has more power than, pretty much any government entity in the world. They're not going to care. It doesn't matter how rich you are. They're not going to rebuild most of that. They're going to say, this is great. There's nothing here. Like Chris was saying, we like the terrarium view, as Wendell Berry calls it, of nature. There'll be nothing there and you'll like it. And so, when you look at where the hope is, I mean, there's probably going to have to be more decline. More events like this are going to happen. And then the people who are serious about, MAGA, Maha rebuilding are going to really have to even physically rebuild America.
Well, MAGA, the group, is really hoping that the Secret Service has his act together because the inauguration is now 1 week from today. I want to say something I saw from our friend Susan Crabtree. We've had her on the show before. She said the Secret Service preparations are in place right now for the inauguration. And she said that drones will be a part of the Secret Service portion of it before and during the inauguration itself, because I know that there are a lot of people out there that are going to see the drones and they're going to start freaking out, rightfully so, because, unanswered questions, but that is actually going to be a part of the Trump plan for his protection.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm glad that the Secret Service is using drones and has caught up to technology that is available to us. I'm glad they're saying it. They're being transparent about it so people don't freak out. I think what's interesting is so many people that have come up to me and talked about this, and you've probably had the same conversations. People will kind of whisper, like, I hope, Trump stays safe. I hope he makes it through his administration. And that's very dark, but that's the kind of conversation people are having because of what happened this summer. So, I think there's a lot of people who are really hoping that security is tight and it remains tight, and they have to reform that Secret Service going into the next 4 years.
It's funny you say that, because when we were at America Fest in Phoenix, I had very well-known people that everybody in the audience would know their names. We had these conversations of, what about the safety of Trump at the inauguration? Like, what else can be done? And it's on a lot of people's minds right now.
No, it's from people who are very involved in politics to, your relatives at home. They're all sort of wondering, I hope he doesn't get out of the car again and walk around. I think that definitely there's been a lot of changes already made to stop the embarrassing things that were happening. But this is a real issue. And I hope one of the first things they do when they go in there is to make sure that safety is paramount and security is real.
Well, we definitely want to make sure that everything is safe out there, because we booked our flights for D.C. For next week as well. So the Blaze will be out there covering the inauguration. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a victory lap. There's so many good people coming together from all across the country. I'm constantly energized by all these people calling me up and saying, oh, I'm going to be in the administration here and there. And we won, people.
We're gonna continue to document it right here on Blaze News Tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.